So this afternoon, I'm going to welcome someone who has worked with Nightingale Hammerson as a project lead, working with St. Christopher's. She supported our projects with training in end-of-life palliative care. Please welcome Helen King.
Thank you, Clements, and thank you, Nightingale. It's lovely to be back with you. And it's really fun to be coming to talk about palliative care in care homes. Now, I just want to put a bit of a sort of rider out there. So there's care homes, and then there's Nightingale Hammerson. And they're a bit different. So some of the things that I'm going to say today are really referring to care homes rather than to Nightingale. So just bear with me. But we've always got so much to learn, so there's never a stopping point, especially when you're thinking about dying, which I think is very interesting. But I have realised that I have got the death slot after lunch, and I'm talking about death, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to go down. But let's see where we get to. I've been working for the last couple of years at St. Christopher's, working on a project which has a very long title. It's called Age-Attuned Palliative Care, and we named the project that we're doing Cascade. What we've been trying to do is cascade good end-of-life care across organisations, and particularly when looking at people with frailty. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is related to that project, but one of my main interests is trying to see the research that we do and how that relates to the care that we give. So we know there's great research out there, but how do we make sure that we use it, and how do we make it make sense? So let's have a little think. And I haven't bought my glasses, so now I'm going to struggle to know what on earth I wrote up here. But these are all basically telling you that we shouldn't be surprised to think that people in care homes are going to die. That's really not news, is it? Because it's a success story. We are, as a society, aging, and people are living much longer than they used to. That's great. But living longer doesn't mean living well. So actually, you don't get, when you live to 99, you don't get more of the bit of being between 40 and 60. You get more of the bit of being 80 plus, when things are starting to slow down and decline. So you might be living those final years of your life with a lot of degree of many different things going on that are losses for you. And I was given such a neat way in by listening to Jude this morning, says that death is part of the process. Death is part of life. Death is what we are meant to be doing. And we really need to focus on that actually, as we go through life, we have to adapt and we have to change. And we have to adapt to those losses and learn to live well to the very end of our lives. So although we're talking about death here and dying, we're actually talking about living, because living is what we do right up until the moment that we die. And making that part of our life cycle and part of what we talk about and think about is so important. And isn't it great? I think my job is done, because if that's starting off in the nursery and they're doing it from day one, then we can all go home, actually, because that's what we need to have happen. We need people to think about this idea that we are all on this process, on this way to death. So how are we going to make the most of this life that we have, given the deficits and the things that are going to happen to us? So it's been well recognised by the NHS that we need to really think about how we care for people who are dying. And that's been pulled into the NHS long-term plan. So we know that the government agree that we need to be focusing on palliative care for older people who we know are going to be having lots of comorbidities and looking at dying. So they've put it in there. Great. They've also looked at enhanced health and care in care homes. I've just been on a group which has been looking at how we provide the right training to staff in the first year of their care home work. So there's been a sort of special project group looking at what information do people need when they first start working in social care. And that's fascinating, because people don't talk about dying very much. And coming into work in a nursing home, what do you need to know? And it's been really fascinating to think about, what is it? What resources can you give people? And the biggest resource you can give is each other and the ability to talk about it. But talking about dying is something that we still don't feel that comfortable with. It's that ghastly D word. So we will use euphemisms for death most of the time because that feels easier to say they've passed on, they've kicked the bucket, they've dropped off the perch. Whatever word you care to use. There's probably a special Jewish word for dying, is there? Must be. But there are over 400 euphemisms for dying. But saying dying is a big problem for many, many people. And so teaching our care home staff just to think about what that means. What does death look like? When might you see it coming? These are all things that people need to know about. So all this work was in the process of happening when along came COVID. Now, it's been terrible. We've all agreed that COVID has been absolutely ghastly. So let's look on the bright side of it for a moment and think it has presented the most fabulous opportunity to engage with death and dying, to think about what happens, and for it to be right out there in the national press, all over the place, that people who are older, who have lots of comorbidities and are unwell, are likely to die when they get something like COVID come along. And so death has been very present in society for the last 18 months. And whilst that's terribly sad for the individuals, for the families, this is such a fantastic opportunity for all of us who work in health to say, yes, death happens. And death happens in your late old age usually, when you've lived a great life, when you've got fantastic experiences. So let's celebrate the fact that we're going to die, because we're celebrating, by doing that, the fact that we're living. So it's that sort of juxtaposition of death